Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a seriously fascinating framework. We are about to completely shatter a myth, one that's probably held you back more times than you can literally count. We're going to completely dismantle the idea that you need emotional motivation to actually get your work done.
Okay, let's dive into this. Motivation is a scam. I know, it sounds aggressive, but neurologically and practically speaking, it's the absolute truth. See, motivation, it's just an emotional spark. It's fantastic for getting you started, sure, but it will absolutely leave you stranded the second the real, gritty work begins. The biggest trap you can fall into is relying on how you feel to execute your tasks. Think about it. If you only sit down to code or study or build your business when you actually feel inspired, you're setting yourself up to remain perfectly average forever. Elite performers, they just don't operate on motivation. They operate on a rigid framework.
Whenever we rely on that emotional spark, we basically become this motivation battery. You know the feeling. You start at 100%, you're sprinting at full speed, but it rapidly drains to zero and you just collapse. Total burnout. But on the flip side, look at the slow and steady trophy. This represents the person who moves mechanically, just step by step toward their goals, without stopping. They aren't sprinting, they definitely aren't relying on some fleeting emotional high. They're just executing with undeniable consistency right to the finish line. So how do we actually get to that steady state? Well, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll decode the emotional crash loop. Second, we'll break down the 3 rules of the protocol. And finally, we'll look at rewiring your identity, quick and painless. All right, part 1, the emotional crash loop. Let's talk about why you always seem to go right back to zero.
If you've ever felt guilty for starting a really ambitious project and then completely abandoning it a week later, let me relieve you of that guilt right now. Seriously, let it go. That sudden drop in drive. It's not a character flaw. It is a biological trap that psychologists call the novelty crash. See, whenever you start a new project, maybe a new business or a new workout plan, your brain releases this massive wave of dopamine simply because the experience is fresh and novel. It's exciting, but that dopamine wears off really fast. When the actual, tedious, hard work kicks in, your brain literally perceives this effort as a threat to its energy reserves and just smashes the panic button.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the timeline of this crash. Look at day 1. Your dopamine is through the roof, right? You're ready to conquer the world. By day 2, it's visibly fading, but you're still kind of pushing through on sheer willpower. But then we hit day 4, that infamous 72-hour mark. You hit rock bottom. Zero. And this is precisely where 99% of people quit. They abandon the whole thing because they haven't separated their execution from their emotions. When the emotion drops to zero, the action just drops to zero right alongside it. Which brings us to part 2, the 3 rules of the protocol. This is all about separating that emotion from your execution. All right, this is the core payload of today's explainer. We're looking at a highly systematic approach known as the 1% fatigue protocol. Think of this as the ultimate antidote to that emotional crash loop we just unpacked. The protocol breaks down into 3 very distinct mechanical steps. Step 1, establish the floor. Step 2, time block energy. Step 3, measure the stride. By following these exact scientific rules, you're going to replace those fleeting emotions with a cold, reliable mechanism. You'll know exactly what mechanical steps to take next, so let's break them down. Rule number 1 is to define your floor level at exactly 10%. Now, this number represents your absolute, non-negotiable minimum effort required for the day. No matter how exhausted, how sick, or how deeply unmotivated you feel, you must hit this 10% floor. It's the absolute baseline of your daily execution. No excuses. To put that into perspective, most average performers operate on a ceiling plan. They'll say, oh, I'm going to edit this video for 2 hours today. And hey, that sounds great, right? Until they get home from a long day, they're super tired, and because 2 hours feels like this impossible mountain to climb, they do literally 0%. Elite performers, on the other hand, use a floor plan. Their goal might still be 2 hours, but their floor is, I will simply open the software and edit for 5 minutes. That 5-minute commitment guarantees that you start. And here's the absolute magic of human psychology. 9 times out of 10, once you push through that initial 5 minutes of friction, your brain stabilizes. The resistance vanishes, and you almost always end up completing the full task anyway. Moving right along to rule 2, which is time blocking your energy. Look, massive end goals completely paralyze the brain. If you're always staring up at the very top of the mountain, you're never going to take the first step. Instead, you need to assign a fixed, unmovable 30-minute block in your schedule. During this specific window, you lock yourself in a room, toss your phone in another room, and do absolutely nothing but the work.
Now here is a tough love truth you really need to internalize. During that 30-minute block, ignore the quality. Seriously, ignore the results entirely. Your only mission is to survive until that timer hits 0. By completely stripping away the pressure of perfection, you remove the anxiety that actually causes you to procrastinate in the first place. Remember, consistency beats perfection every single day of the week.
Rule 3 is all about how you track your progress. Measure the stride. So the crucial point is that measuring the output, like obsessively checking your video views or your subscriber count or refreshing your bank account, that triggers intense emotional fatigue. You're going to constantly feel like your massive effort just isn't paying off fast enough. High performers don't look forward at the huge, intimidating horizon. They actually look backward. They measure the input. They fiercely protect their daily execution streak on a calendar. Listen, if you just focus on doing the inputs today, the massive outputs are literally going to take care of themselves.
Let's move to and see how this builds into part 3, rewiring your identity. This is about casting votes for completely new subconscious. See, consistently following this protocol, it isn't just some clever productivity hack. You are forging a completely new identity. These points right here are the traits of your newly programmed subconscious. Every single time you execute a task when you desperately do not want to, you are physically rewiring your brain. You're basically casting a vote for a new version of yourself. Your actions become completely independent of your mood. You become unstoppable by internal friction and unstoppable by external chaos. You're essentially building this structural armor around your discipline. When your output is completely disconnected from how you feel, man, you become a highly dangerous individual in your field.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. I want to leave you with a question to really sit with. Will you wait for the perfect feeling, or will you protect your floor? The perfect feeling is a scam. It's a total illusion. Motivation is always going to drain to 0, so stop waiting for it. Build your system, protect your 10% floor at absolutely all costs, and break that burnout loop forever. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I highly encourage you to go set your floor and start executing this protocol right now. See you next time.